This is the captain of the Enterprise. Ship.
Podcasting, the final frontier. These are the ridiculous introductions I am forced to read at gunpoint, or should I say phaser point.
Ship.
Welcome to Ship, yet another in the long line of tedious Star Trek podcasts. This show is hosted by David Lawler and David B. Anderson. The two Davids will take you on a journey through time and space every 3 or 4 weeks, boldly podcasting where no podcast has gone before. Seriously? This is what you're making me read? Take it away, boys.
Hello, this is David Anderson, and this is Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast. I'm here with Mr. David Lawler. How are you tonight, sir?
How are you?
I am well. This is sort of a bonus surprise episode. Would you say?
It's kind of a sad emergency episode.
Sad emergency episode. We're really talking about like the sad part is really just the first part. Really,
this is something we don't really do. We don't talk about the next generation. We haven't really.
No, I don't know that
it doesn't come up in
we
conversation.
were going to. I think at some point we were going to get to these episodes, right? I thought that was kind of.
I guess in our 80s.
Yeah.
We're old podcasters.
Yeah.
But Stephen Hawking died recently, so we're going to talk about the episode. The two-parter actually. He was only in one part, and really only in the
at the beginning.
In the cold open.
Mm-hmm.
That's at the beginning of the episode. But it's Descent Part 1 and Descent Part 2, the sixth season finale and the 7th season premiere.
Yes.
Of Star Trek Next Generation. I believe these episodes premiered in 1994, I believe.
Or
1993.
The end of 93 and then the beginning of 93. So like the end of the season in 93 and then at the beginning of the last season in 93.
Number one on our list of things to do.
He is in these episodes. He appears in the cold open before the credits. Actually, it's weird. The Descent Part 1 is very strange because the credits come before.
I noticed that too, and I thought, is this
titles.
some sort of thing particular to this episode? I don't remember the whole show being that. I remember it being.
It was never. No,
yeah, there would be something at the beginning,
before.
then they go to the credits, and then they would go to the opening title with the next gen theme, which is the motion picture theme,
and then it would open up.
If
I remember correctly, the reason for that was because we go right into the action.
Yeah.
After the opening music is over and Act 1 begins, we're already in the action. Maybe the producers felt that the credits would only interfere with
maybe
what
it was like their edit.
Because there's a big fight scene, a big phaser fight.
It could have been like that their edit was so long. They're like, what can we compromise as far as like editing this episode? And then they're like, well, here, we'll just do it this way. It gives us an extra couple minutes of.
We start off with a very cute poker game that Data has put together in the holodeck between Dr. Stephen Hawking, Albert Einstein, and Sir Isaac Newton. It's some kind of an experiment to see what the greatest minds of our time would do in a poker situation.
Yeah, and Isaac Newton is played by
John
Neville, who
was Baron Munchausen.
I thought Munchausen. He would also be in the X-Files.
He was one of the.
I know he was in the X-Files movies. I can't remember if he was in the actual X-Files show. I think he was.
He was. He was in several episodes. He was like among the cronies of the cigarette smoking man and people like that.
And then
these evil power mongers.
Somebody playing Einstein in terrible makeup.
I don't know who.
Could have been a special guest star that we just didn't know who it was.
What was funny about that is that apparently Einstein, because it's a poorly kept secret that Einstein was a terrible mathematician, so he could never get things right.
But then I said, in that frame of reference, the perihelion of Mercury would have precessed in the opposite direction.
That is a great story.
Quite amusing, Dr. Hawking. You see, Sir Isaac, the joke depends on an understanding of the relativistic curvature of space-time. If two non-inertial reference frames are in relative motion...
Do not patronize me, sir. I invented physics. The day that apple fell on my head was the most momentous day in the history of science.
Not the apple story again.
That story is generally considered to be apocryphal.
What? How dare you?
You'd say like Einstein was more about like the larger picture. He was able to grasp larger concepts, but not actual math.
Yeah. And he was a patent clerk too.
You know how much a patent clerk earns?
Jim Norton. I'm guessing not the comedian.
No,
It can't be the
comedian.
comedian.
I think he would have been like 12 then or something.
No, he's an Irish actor, and he's 80 years old.
Oh.
80 years young, he's still alive. Star Trek, okay, The Next Generation was a franchise that started in 1987, and it was it's pretty much kind of like the Star Trek of our generation. So we're going to recognize a lot of actors. There were a lot of like older actors, older character actors who were even involved in the original Star Trek and around that time period, Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, like the early to late 60s and part of the 70s, and they would pop up on shows like Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. But you would see a lot of people that you've seen in movies, and just all these people working on shows like Next Generation and Deep Space Nine.
And I'd like to say, like, while this, I wouldn't say that this is the best example of Next Generation. I'd say it's a solid episode. A few missed opportunities.
It's okay,
but it's not. But it's like compared to the old series, it's still excellent. Like even a meh episode is still better. I would say generally better made, better structured, more understanding of what they're trying to do.
I think what that has to do with is that Next Generation and a lot of the other shows that went after it, like Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, are ensemble efforts. So everyone's working together, and you could tell that everybody got along very well together.
It's the quality of the. This is like a show from what 25-ish years ago. Yeah. It's so well made. I mean, if you go back, let's go back to like say the early 80s. Let's go back to say, and I'm just off the top of my head, I was thinking about this. Remington Steele.
Pierce Brosnan. And Stephanie Zimbalist,
you go back and you watch those things. They're so terribly made. They're so clunky. It's like they're still coming off that sort of that 60s, 70s way of doing television. And it's clunky. It's slow. The acting is bad, and it's not really it's not even the actor's fault. It's a style of making stuff. And then
they were still fun, though. I remember enjoying Remington Steele. Isn't that about Stephanie Zimbalist runs a detective agency, but nobody takes her seriously, so she kind of hires this con man played by Pierce Brosnan.
She basically needs James Bond, and she finds James Bond.
So it's called Remington Steele Detective Agency, and he's Remington Steele.
Yes.
But she's the one who does all the work, and he just basically looks handsome.
Not to be confused with Lexington Steele, the very large penis black porn actor.
That's wonderful. He played Darth Vader in the Star Wars porn parody.
I'm not surprised.
Okay, so Descent Part 1. Like we get through with the cold open, of course. Hawking wins the game, and they find a ship. They go on board this ship, and it turns out it's teeming with Borg, and they get into a firefight right away. And then we go right to the opening titles, and then back into the action, like we said before, without the credits. Data, for some reason,
do they have the big fight with Data where he kind of feels something before the credits angry. Or after the credits?
It's after. Okay. It's after. We're right in the action. Data grabs a Borg, starts to strangle him, I guess snaps his neck, throws him against the wall, pulls an old Darth Vader or something. He's like, stop, and he gets really angry. And he's disturbed by this because he actually gets angry. So he takes himself off duty to study his emotional outburst. Now, both episodes reference several episodes from Next Generation. Yes. The first one is obviously Q Who from the second season, where the Borg were first introduced, which is considered one of the best episodes ever made. And I remember when I first saw that episode, the episode that introduces the Borg, Q basically, I don't know, he asks to join them as a crew member or something like that. And they're like, no, thank you. We don't want your help. We hate you, blah, blah, blah. And he says, oh, yeah, you're going to need me more than you think. He snaps his fingers, sends the ship to another quadrant where they are attacked by the Borg. And I remember this is the first episode of The Next Generation that I watched, and I said, this show is distinguishing itself from the original series. This is the show that really sort of made a name for the for the Next Generation.
Yeah, doesn't he kind of because they would not have...
Because they are frightening.
I don't think
they are completely
would the Borg have even ever come into contact with them had they not encountered them when Q, it basically sent them...
you can pretty much blame Q for this.
Yeah.
For that
and
introducing
First Contact, which it's like this is like when they start fudging with the story of the Borg. Every time they need the Borg to do something, they kind of change it a little. I mean,
the first when the Borg were first introduced in that episode, their primary mission was to steal technology, you know. And then it became, when they next appeared in the third season, in the season finale, you know, the best of both worlds, the famous episodes. Then it became about assimilating cultures.
Well, not just cultures, just technology, just everything. Everything will be assimilated.
We will add your cultural and technological distinctiveness to our own, and that was their mission.
And then this is almost like a sequel to the episode that they had before. I don't know if it was in this season.
It was in the fifth.
It was the fifth season, like with Hugh.
With Hugh, it was called Iborg.
And when I saw this, I'm like, you know what? They should have put that virus in Hugh and sent it, because then
they sort of did. I mean, like, I think what I'm seeing here is that, you know, at the end of that episode, like they were like, Picard was wrestling with the moral complication of infecting the Borg with a virus that Geordi designed, and he even gets Guinan to go along with his plan too. Mm-hmm. First, he's like, let's kill them all. And then he's like, as they begin to understand that the Borg are actually people underneath all that cybernetic crap, that once they're disconnected from the hive mind, the collective intellect, they're just people.
It doesn't matter.
Like all of us.
It doesn't. I mean, we had a conversation about dealing with certain humans, of like, some people are just lost. People are, you know what? We can't even fix regular people. We certainly can't fix robot people.
Yeah, but I understand. I understand the sentiment of being able to try to change an entire culture. So they figured, with Hugh disconnected from the collective, and the influence of Geordi winds up being a very good friend to Hugh. Even names him. He gave him the name Hugh. Yeah. I don't. It's kind of. If I were naming a Borg, I'd go with John or Rodney.
Well, wasn't he named because he kept saying you, and then he just named him Hugh?
No, I think, yeah, they show a scene where they actually named him, and he says, "I'm Geordi, I'm Beverly, and you," and he goes, "You," and he says, "No, let's call him Hugh."
Yeah.
Or something like that, you know.
But so like when they,
and he's
when
just
they
a kid.
back,
he's just like a teenage kid, right?
I probably could guess, like, I was thinking like late teens, early 20s, kind of a small guy. I'm thinking that when they sent him back, and this is where they kind of changed continuities. They keep changing continuities. They sent him back, and he wasn't infected with the virus, but I guess he was infected with humanity.
He was infected with humanity. Humanity was the disease. And then when they sent him back, interesting.
Did he infect just the Borg ship that he was with and just his few Borgs, or did that infect the entire Borg collective totally?
I think it did infect the Borg collective, but only a select few, like the ones we meet in these two episodes. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who really, they become lost in that way.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I don't know, he said in the episode, for a split second before they bring him back into the collective, each Borg will experience what he experienced. And, they were hoping that the entire Borg collective would completely, be destroyed and replaced with some level of humanity or something like that. But I guess it's only because, maybe it ties in with the Queen from First Contact, because remember how she calls herself "I am Borg"? She says "I am Borg" in that.
Mm. But again, these Borgs changed. They're always futzing with the continuity enough. I mean, remember First Contact? They don't really delve into their humanity at all.
I don't know. It's Alice Krieg, right? And she's like coming on to Data for some reason.
And okay, now so they were warring with each other. At least this chunk of Borg was fighting with each other.
Yeah, maybe it's like a splinter cell of Borg that went to this
planet. Somehow they come into contact. I mean, we don't really. Wait! Don't
okay,
no spoiler. Okay, sorry.
Well, first, Data is trying to figure out why the hell he feels this way. The crew and Picard are trying to figure out what the hell's wrong with the Borg, because they're experiencing emotions. They noticed this during the attack. They have names for each other, right?
Yeah.
They have like a sense of friendship or something like that. They contact Starfleet. The bitch admiral, I forget, Nechayev, I believe. She's always bitching out either Picard or Sisko.
Now, am I mistaken that she was also on the show called Son of the Beach? Miss Massengill, like Mayor Massengill or something. I think that's the same one. She looked very similar to her. It's like the face looked familiar to me. Son of the Beach would have been, I'd say, but like maybe 7-8 years later, so she wouldn't have been that much older.
The actress who plays Admiral Nechayev, I've seen before. She was in an episode of Tales from the Crypt. I remember that, playing a gypsy fortune teller in the episode with.
I would not have pegged her as a gypsy.
She plays, well, she has like this accent, and she's like this. She talks like this. And she was, I forget if it was the one with Leah Thompson or Demi Moore. But one of them goes to a fortune teller, and she gives them advice. She was on Lou Grant. She was in Designing Women. She was on Dynasty. She was on Cagney and Lacey. She was in a television version of the show, Dirty Dancing.
How was that?
She was in Jack's Place, Sisters, Moon Over Miami, and L.A. Law. Mm-hmm. She was on fucking Ally McBeal, Charmed Without a Trace, Jag, The West Wing. Jesus, she was on everything. Yeah. Recently, she was in Bones, The Unit, and 24. And she was on NCIS and Criminal Minds. So this one is everywhere. My God. Ned and Stacy, Murder One, The Practice, Frasier, Home Improvement, Chicago Hope. Jesus.
See, there's hope for actors. You can just keep popping up.
But I see no Son of the Beach here. I said there's no Son of the Beach. Okay. In fact, as a matter of fact, you get that kind of work, you're not going to be on a show like Son of the Beach. Son of the Beach was kind of like on the lower end of. The only thing I know from Son of the Beach was Howard Stern's wife was on that show.
For like 2 scenes, or she's probably just background. But no, it had the dad from Parker Lewis. I remember that. He was the star of the show.
So, but Nechayev, I mean, like, she's a great actor because I hate her guts. I absolutely hate her guts. She chews Picard out. She says, you had an opportunity to destroy this entire race. And he's like, Picard, I have to be kind of a Picard advocate here because I was like, what the fuck? We're Starfleet, okay? We're not fucking Klingons, and we don't do that. And she yells at him, and he believes that you can. Picard was like that. He wasn't like Kirk. Kirk would totally destroy the fucking Borg if he.
Well, it's like he said, let them die.
Yeah, let them fucking die. Picard is like, we will live by our example.
You know what?
Look at us and all
Gosh
this.
Darn it, that's the Borg. They need to be destroyed. You should have done that. You should have sent the virus in there.
But then, we wouldn't have this situation where we do have people like you and other people who just want to live their lives. They don't want to assimilate. And then they get into this bad situation involving a character, which we'll reveal in a second.
But I gotta say, because of his humanity, he basically destroyed how much of Starfleet was destroyed in that battle with the Borg when they finally hit Earth in First Contact? That was probably like the entire fleet almost.
Well, there were 2 big ones, right? There was the First Contact battle, but there was the first one was Wolf 359, the Best of Both Worlds Parts 1.
Well, yeah,
and
but
2.
that was before Hugh.
That was before Hugh. But they knew who he was. I mean, like, I remember when Picard wanted to get Hugh's attention, he called himself Locutus of Borg. Mm-hmm. He said, I am Locutus. Well, actually, no. Hugh actually sees him right away and goes, Locutus.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
I never seen you without all that shit on your head. Mm-hmm. He's like, yes, I am Locutus of Borg. We will assimilate this ship. And he's like, no, Geordi's my friend. I don't want to assimilate him. Well, first, I want a little background about Dr. Stephen Hawking. Hawking had a rare early-onset, slow-progressing form of motor neuron disease, also known as amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, that gradually paralyzed him over the decades. My first experience with Stephen Hawking, his book, A Brief History of Time, I read the book, and then I bought it for my mother for her birthday one time. He's a great writer. He had it was so funny because you think Dr. Stephen William Hawking of England, CHCBE-FRS-FRSA, this guy with a string of letters after his name. He's like some kind of a crazy genius. He's in a wheelchair. He uses a computer to talk. He has the funny voice that people love to imitate. But he is such a great writer. It's like how we have like Neil deGrasse Tyson and people like that, and who else? Who's that guy? Bill Nye. They try to make science palatable for people who can't understand science. Stephen Hawking was one of the first people to actually do this, and you actually get a working understanding of quantum theory, quantum mechanics. Reading his book, he speaks in metaphors that are very similar to the way that I guess Star Trek tries to speak in metaphors to explain certain things to you. You know how we always in Star Trek, mainly in the newer shows, people talk in this crazy techno babble. You read the book. Actually, Brief History of Time is a very funny book. The guy has a great sense of humor, and it's amazing to me what kind of a person he would have been without the wheelchair.
Yeah, I mean,
and without the voice box.
He was able to write a book, and certainly by this time he was already in the chair. He probably couldn't move. Mm-hmm. I mean, he kind of got to a certain level of crappiness and then just sort of stayed there as far as I could tell. Like he got kind of messed up by say like the mid-late 70s. He was very messed up.
He was one of these guys who, if he got like even the most minor illness, like a flu or something like that, it was like life-threatening. Mm-hmm. Well, most recently, my daughter read a book that he and his daughter wrote. It was a children's book about science. And I was looking at it. I was glancing over it, and a very, very amusing little book. So she read it for school or something. Mm-hmm. So he died recently. He died a couple of days ago. And
by the way, he was a Mac daddy. I mean, he was getting way more women than I'm getting, and he was getting like he divorced his wife.
Did he have like gold rims on his wheelchair?
He did the nurse.
I'm trying to figure out how he could have children. Maybe it was very complicated. Maybe it was very coming home, Jane Fonda, John Voight sex or something. I don't know.
Maybe it still works. Maybe it's the one thing that still worked.
Amazing. Okay, so back to the episode.
Yeah.
Data has an interesting conversation with Troy because he's been trying to recreate that feeling. The feeling, he's been trying to recreate the emotion. He's been trying to get himself to feel emotion or something. So he's telling Troy that he has exposed himself to erotic imagery.
Yeah, much like Stephen Hawking, and he is fully functional.
Fully functional. I am fully functional. And Troy is actually delighted by this. She loves the idea of Data trying to get himself turned on.
He can't.
Which is weird. But Troy actually kind of... I don't know if I can blame her completely for this, but she does say, Data, you should try to recreate the feeling you had when you killed the Borg. So he does. He goes and he tries to, but he also tells her he felt pleasure after he killed the Borg, which disturbs Troy and me and you and everyone watching this episode.
Well, that's him getting fully in touch with his humanity, because that's kind of what we're built for when you really think about it.
Geordi, I believe I've experienced my first emotion.
No offense, Data, but how would you know a flash of anger from some odd kind of power surge?
You are correct in that I have no frame of reference to confirm my hypothesis. In fact, I am unable to provide a verbal description of the experience. Perhaps you could describe how it feels to be angry. I could then use that as a reference.
Okay. Well, when I feel angry, first I feel hostile.
Could you describe feeling hostile?
Well, yeah, it's like feeling belligerent, combative.
Could you describe feeling angry without referring to other feelings?
No, I guess I can't. I just feel angry.
That was my experience as well. I simply felt angry.
All right. During another attack, later that we have another attack, they capture a Borg after they try to take the bridge. The Borg, they actually do try to take the bridge. Riker with his barrel chest starts getting into a fight with Borg, and so does Worf. Well, Worf actually is smart because he just grabs his phaser and just starts killing them right there.
I want to say this is kind of like he's back to being in shape. At least he seems to be. Maybe he's wearing a good girdle, but he looks pretty.
Who, Frakes?
Pretty fit for him. I mean, it's a nice nice
Frakes,
loose fitting suit.
He was okay. Frakes gained a lot of weight in the 4th season, and then he took it off by the end of the 5th season, and he was in much better shape.
You're saying after he had the baby, he was able to.
I guess he was really
take the weight off.
He's unfortunately, Frakes. I'm kind of built like him. We're like about 6'1", 6'2", and our average, based on our muscle mass, our average weight back then. I don't know how it is now because everybody seems to be morbidly obese over a certain weight.
They are,
but you have to be at least 200 pounds to be healthy when you're that height. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it gets to be quite a slog working 14-hour days, so you don't exercise. It's kind of like what happened to Shatner. Shatner would gain weight too. And so did, I noticed, Avery Brooks, because I've been watching Deep Space Nine. He packed it on and then lost it, packed it on and then lost it as well. So when you're a certain height, you just sort of look
It's basically what happened to Shatner is, he'd get in shape and then the rough days and all the getting all the babes.
Although Shatner was not, I think Shatner was like 5'10" or 5'9". He wasn't really that tall. And Avery Brooks not as tall either. It's just, it happens to men. We know this. Come on, we're men.
We know this. Yeah.
So during the attack, they capture a Borg and put him in the brig. and Data has to do work on him. You know, the thing about this is when Data feels this is one of the problems I have with the episode is some of the behaviors, some of the decisions that Picard makes are rather stupid. I would have taken Data off duty and have him just go back to Earth and possibly check his circuits and everything, not lead him directly into this adventure, because I know what's going to happen. And what happens is this Borg convinces Data to flee with him, because he's manipulating him with this weird kind of computer, this weird computer program that he's running, and that's somehow affecting Data's positronic memory.
And we won't say it yet, but he is sort of linked to another character that is causing this to happen.
Yes, that winds up being the leader, or the One.
Yeah.
They call him the One, the leader of the Borg. So, okay, they take off in a shuttlecraft. The Enterprise chases them. You know, at this point, again, I would be like, if I were Picard, I'd be like, let's go back to Earth and get instructions. Because, you know, we don't want to fuck with the Borg by ourselves, because we're gonna die.
I think that's the reason he did it, because it's like, we don't have time. We don't have time to consult any. We got to get this. This is the Borg. We can't mess around. I think that's the reasoning of, like, we got to do this.
Yeah. So they go to an isolated planet through this portal.
Yeah, it's kind of like this this Borg created. I mean, and they kind of did a little bit of that in First Contact, when they kind of created a wormhole and then went back in time through it. It's kind of like the same thing.
Time portal, yeah. But this is like some kind of a corridor, they call it. They call it a corridor. Yeah. So they go through this corridor, they wind up at this isolated planet, and then Picard makes another stupid decision. He beams down everybody on the ship to look for Data, which I think is dumb.
And one guy
send
that
100
looks
people,
especially like sort of shifty and his eyes are darting. I was like, oh, he's dead. He's gonna be the guy. It's like the only one that we don't know. He's gone. He's gonna be the first guy to make a mistake and go.
He sends down everybody, and he leaves Beverly in charge, which is what?
Well, that's I mean, he went.
I realize
down.
she's ranking.
She's number 3, isn't she? Isn't the Doctor number 3? Or yeah.
Okay, so what should be done? But the thing is, unfortunately, this is a problem with Star Trek. You have to put your captain in danger because he's the star of the show, right?
Yeah.
The way it should be, and the way it always was before this episode, was Picard stayed on board, and everyone else did all the work.
Well, maybe he feels especially.
Riker was usually the one who
would handle this especially kind of connected to this because he's Locutus, and I don't know.
So they go down. They split up into different teams while Beverly is up there, and Beverly has a Borg ship that she has to deal with in the second part, which we'll get to in a second. And Riker and Worf split up, go to one area, and Geordi, Troy, and Picard, and an unfortunate red shirt, although they're not really red shirts on this show, go into this unusual structure, this building that seems to be shielded. They can't figure out what the hell's in there.
When I was looking at it, I was like, it looked like it could have been like at least part of it was a real building. Like some sort of office building or something that was oddly shaped, and they just sort of the rest of it was a matte painting, but it looked like they were walking around an actual structure.
It was they were experimenting with digital matte for computer at that time, because I remember seeing a behind the scenes about how they wanted to make the environment look a little more alien, and they actually had computers working on this stuff back then.
It might have looked more real to me because I watched it on Netflix, and they had that sort of the remastered HD everything, and maybe they cleaned up the special effects, and so it just looked more realistic.
It looked good. I think the building is real. I think it was just I think they kind of they took the real building and they put it against a computer-generated background.
Yeah.
I think that's what they did.
Yeah, because it looks kind of orange and kind of...
Yeah, it's a very stunning building. And then they get inside, and there's all this weird iconography going on that kind of reminds me a little bit of the Nazi Party, the Nazi flags. There's this weird symbol that looks like
I thought it looked kind of like those cheap sets that they use in Star Trek 6 when they're having the final, the sort of the summit meeting. And it's just like this sort of this set where it's kind of cheap, and it's got
people can be very frightened of change.
Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kirk jumping out of nowhere to save that guy. Are you kidding me? He's 70 years old. Anyway, he rescues the dude. And Scotty kills the assassin, who's played by Odo, of all people.
Yeah, and that's actually that's actually in the extended home video version. In the theatrical version, he doesn't actually pull off the mask, and you just think it's another Klingon.
Picard, Troy, and Geordi and the unfortunate red shirt. The unfortunate red shirt gets killed. All these Borg converge on them, and they're not quiet. You remember how they used to be? They would walk around. They wouldn't say anything, and they were not threatened by you at all. So they would walk right by. The Borg really scared the fuck out of me when I first saw them in that first episode they were in. In the second, I was like, "What is this?" They're not telling you what their purpose. They're walking around. They're checking out your stuff. They're messing with your stuff. They have shields, so you try to phaser them, and they just stand there and they just completely ignore you and then leave. It's like really the creepiest thing in the world. The Borg take the three of them prisoner. A guy comes up who looks like Data but isn't Data, and for some reason Troy figures it out right away. She's like, Lore.
Yeah.
And
actually, she
so
just says that's not Data, and then Picard says Lore. He's like, right. And then Data comes out, and suddenly Data's crazy. He's like, the brothers of Soong will take over the world or some shit, or the galaxy, and everybody's like, oh shit. And then we get the to be continued. Yeah. Which I want to say,
Lore turns out to be the leader of these Borg.
As far as cliffhangers go, the idea of it is awesome, but I'd say the payoff is little. And much like the payoff when you got with like that one, I think it was the season before, where
season before that was Data's, a time travel episode?
They went through some sort of thing where they ended up in the Old West and they had Data's head or something. Remember that one?
They wind up in San Francisco in the 19th century, I think.
They attached his head.
And for some reason, Guinan is around and hanging out with Mark Twain, or Samuel Clemens, I should say, played by Deep Throat from X-Files. Remember that?
Oh!
Yeah, that was this is like when the end of the third season
and
was
the fourth season.
Began.
That's like they never topped that. And they never could. In fact,
that's what began the whole fascination with cliffhangers. So they ended the third season with Picard becoming a Borg. Resistance is futile. Riker's about to destroy the ship, and it ends to be continued. And then we move on to the fourth season, which is like a cliffhanger about the Klingon Empire unraveling. Worf leaves Starfleet and joins the Klingons, and then he comes back.
Well, okay, wasn't that? I could swear that maybe I'm thinking of another episode where the cliffhanger wasn't it with the Romulans and Tasha Yar's like daughter from the alternate universe?
that was the cliffhanger for the fourth season, where it showed, I believe, the Romulans were trying to create a war between the Federation and the Klingons or something. Mm-hmm. And they were introduced for some Tasha Yar. It all has to do with this alternate parallel reality. It had to do.
Yeah, she was actually like the alternate Yar came into our
daughter.
Universe.
Well, she was the daughter of Yar. Yeah. And then after that, we had of course, Time Zero Part 1 and 2, where they went back in time. Data's head is turned up somewhere in a cavern in San Francisco, and they get to hang out with Samuel Clemens. And then we have
this. This is the last cliffhanger.
Yeah, we have this, but also in season 6 we had the introduction of two-parters in the middle of the season 2, where you remember when Picard is tortured by the Cardassians.
Uh-huh. I'm also thinking the unification is the one with Spock
with Nimoy, right? Yeah, that was the 5th season.
Yeah, that was kind of almost like, I think that tied in with Star Trek 6.
Yeah, that was kind of like a cheap tie-in because
it really had nothing to do with Star Trek 6.
Nimoy kind of references, or Spock rather references, incidents from Star Trek 6, so that people will be like, "Ooh, let's go see Star Trek 6." Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a commercial for Star Trek 6 in a way.
You are now listening to Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with David Lawler and David B. Anderson. Boldly podcasting, where no podcast has... I'm not reading this. I'm not. Where's my coat? I'm getting out of here. I hate it here.
Ship, ship.
Hailing frequency zones.
Ship, ship.
I, in my opinion, anyway, I don't know how you think about it. It's the worst season, I think, of the show.
Well, it kind of goes back to our discussing about Return of the Jedi, where it's like everything needed to be wrapped up. This is the wrap-up season. They knew it was going to be the last season, and then they knew they were going to do a movie next. And I think that they were like, well, we'll take all these loose ends, and they kind of start the wrapping up of the loose ends with this episode in the first episode of this season, I think. With Lore, and I had a question about Lore, because what and they had a few episodes with him. Now, did he like escape at the end of the previous episode that he was in, and then that was okay?
Yeah, that episode was from the 4th season. It was called Brothers.
Jesus, so
Dr.
it took from the 4th season to the 6th season to have him come in again, and then at the end, I mean, that's a great character. They should have done more with him.
Lore was first introduced in the 1st season episode Data Lore, and of course, you know, I mean, like if you have a guy who looks exactly like you, he's got to be evil. So you got an evil twin, evil android twin, or something like that. I think the backstory was that Dr. Soong created Lore first, and then shut him down when he realized that Lore wasn't correct.
By the way, a completely wasted opportunity to not bring Lore back for Star Trek Nemesis. Which season is the one where he goes from having his own hair to having some sort of weird hair transplant? Because in this,
I have no idea. I never thought about it.
I noticed as a follically challenged American, I noticed these things, and you can clearly tell it's either some sort of wig or transplant or weave with his hair then, whereas before he was very slicked back. There was a lot more hair going on. I mean, there are literally shots where you can see through his hair because the light hits the hair, and like I can't tell if it's a wig or a transplant or what. It looks very transplanty to me.
Well, I mean,
because the gold makeup, either that or like the gold makeup, they were like very careful to get the gold makeup or whatever that makeup is.
The only radical change I can see in his hairstyle was probably Nemesis for me. Is his hair looks a little too big in the front in Nemesis.
Probably,
but that might have been also the same.
I'd have to literally go through.
Insurrection.
Maybe when we get to like reviewing episodes, I'll literally go through and I'll just do we did like the Shatner hair check, Shatner hair update.
So we're gonna have to do a Spiner
hair
wig update.
I'm just kind of like, well, okay, this was about.
Wait, hang on.
Because
let me add a sound effect here. The Brent Spiner wig update. Yeah. Right. We'll just echo that
one. It's a trademark of our podcast.
Well, according to Data, he can control the follicle length of his hair.
Ooh.
So
I'd have to
all
go
he
back
has to
to
do
the
is hit a button.
and he changes. It's weird. Like you would think he goes from kind of skinny to chunkier, but he actually goes from sort of a skinny person to probably a more fit in shape person.
He gets you can tell at the end of the show's run.
He's just more muscular.
When they go back,
fat, he just his face filled out.
Well, compare Encounter at Farpoint to All Good Things, the final episode, because they actually go back in that episode to the Farpoint mission.
That's right, but they're all like
wearing
older.
Yeah, they're all wearing their original jumpsuits, and you can tell that they have all gained weight. And Spiner comes into the scene, Data comes into the scene, and Chief O'Brien too. Chief O'Brien very a lot heavier in this final episode.
I think he's just in shape. I think he's just more muscular and in shape. That's my guess. Because he just looks skinny in that first season.
But for Data and Picard, you can see their guts sticking out a little bit. Their guts are sticking. I was like, oh my God, did Data gain that much weight in 7 years? I guess he did. And Picard too. I mean, they had steady jobs and they were probably eating very well finally. So because they were all starving actors when the show first started.
Either that, or he's like in shape and all that creatine, bloated him up or something.
Okay, so Descent Part 2 begins and Lore, Data, and the Borg capture Picard, Troy, and Geordi. Troy can sense emotions in Data. And Lore talks about how he's given these Borg a purpose, that he has a sense of purpose. And he's being called the One, and it's obviously, these are references to a cult. And the writer said that it was basically kind of like an analog of David Koresh, because this was around the time that the Waco compound had been destroyed.
Right, it was.
My brother and I serve a much higher purpose.
Data, I can sense feelings in you.
Yes. My brother has made that possible.
He gave you the chip. The one Dr. Soong made for you.
No. I still have the emotional program my father designed. I wouldn't want to give it up. It's what has given me such a strong sense of family. An intense desire to reunite with my dear brother.
How did he do it, Data? What made you decide to come here?
I am talking to you, Picard. I will tell you all you need to know.
You're controlling him, and you've corrupted the Borg.
You simply don't understand, do you? You have no idea what has happened here. How I found my true calling. How the Borg found something to believe in.
I would like to learn about that. But I want Data to tell us.
I told you. I will tell you what you need to know.
How about that, Data? He won't even let you talk.
Do not try to drive a wedge between us, Captain. I am loyal to my brother. You see, Picard? He's not your pawn anymore. I've helped him to break free, just as I've helped them. Look at them. Look at what I've helped them become. They're no longer simply mindless automatons. They're passionate, alive.
Are you saying that you caused them to become individuals?
No, you did that. You and your friends. All I did was clean up the mess you made when that Borg you befriended returned to his ship. Hugh interfaced with the others and transferred his sense of individuality to them. It nearly destroyed them.
Data, do you remember when Hugh was on board the Enterprise? Do you remember what you were like then?
That doesn't matter.
It matters to me. I want to know what has happened to Data.
What's important is what I've done here. How I found my calling. I know now why I was created. No one can ever take that away from me.
So Lawler is kind of like a David Koresh type, and he's controlling Data. So, but first I wanted to mention brothers, right? Okay, so Lawler kills. First, Dr. Sung tells Data that he has this emotion chip for him, and you can have it. He's about to give it to him, but he doesn't realize that Lawler has deactivated Data and takes the chip himself and goes fucking psycho and kills Dr. Sung. And then Lawler disappears. He takes off. He takes off with the second emotion chip. And that's what we get to the end of, I guess, this episode when we get to that. So, meanwhile, Beverly's in command of the Enterprise. She's a bit of a nut. She takes the ship into the sun using this experimental shield technology that was referenced in the 6th season episode Suspicions. A Ferengi scientist developed some kind of a shield for ships so they can exist in a sun's corona or something.
Yeah, and this is where we have two characters that were not in the original, in the part one. All of a sudden they pop up where you have like the ensign and then this sort of douchey guy.
Yeah, you have the cute black girl who's just trying to prove herself and the douchey guy who keeps mocking her. But she winds up being right because she's a woman.
I swear that douchey guy came back and played a Cardassian.
He did. No. Actually, he was in that episode that I just mentioned, Suspicions, playing an alien.
Okay.
He's the bad guy in that episode. My wife said that he was in soap operas. She recognizes him from soap operas or something.
He seems to be making a conscious effort to play as douchey as possible.
Well, yeah, but eventually I think she does earn his respect.
I guess.
He's like, you're not so bad. Let's get rid of those breasts and you'll be perfect. He's
like
one of these. I don't want any women on my bridge.
They always when Crusher is the captain, they always call her sir.
Sir.
Aren't you supposed to call him ma'am? Isn't it?
No. Navy. This is Navy terminology. You refer to them as sir. You don't say miss or ma'am or anything like that. I know that Kirk has called Uhura Miss Uhura sometimes, and that's not a good idea. You're not supposed to actually do that.
I know I know that they called Mr. Savick. I always remembered that of like.
Yeah. Officers and enlisted men are always referred to as Mr. and Sir.
I'll remember that.
That's just for
if I ever end up in Starfleet, I'll remember that.
Or in the Navy. In the Navy.
Oh.
Come on and join your fellow man.
Well, that's village people. Of course, they all like men. I mean, that's a whole other conversation.
Beverly has a battle of wits with this Borg ship. She winds up being successful. Meanwhile, Riker and Worf have split off and gone into caves where they find Hugh, and they find a bunch of Hugh's compatriots.
You blame us for what has happened to the Borg.
You gave me a sense of individuality, changed me, then sent me back to the collective. You must have known that change would be passed on to others.
We considered it. We knew it was a possibility.
Then you made it possible for Lore to dominate us.
I cannot accept that. Lore is only one. The Borg could have stopped him.
You don't know the condition we were in when he found us. Before my experience on the Enterprise, the Borg were a single-minded collective. The voices in our heads were smooth and flowing. But after I returned, those voices began to change. They became uneven, discordant. For the first time, individual Borg had differing ideas about how to proceed. Couldn't function. Some Borg fought each other. Others simply shut themselves down. Many starved to death.
And then Lore came along.
You probably can't imagine what it is like to be so lost and frightened that you will listen to any voice which promises change.
Even if that voice insists on controlling you.
That's what we wanted. Someone to show us a way out of confusion. Lawler promised clarity and purpose. In the beginning, he seemed like a savior. The promise of becoming a superior race. But becoming fully artificial was compelling. We gladly did everything he asked of us. But after a while, it became clear that Lawler had no idea how to keep his promise. That's when he began talking about the need for us to make sacrifices. Before we realized it, this was the result.
What happened to them?
Lawler began to experiment, trying to remake us in his image. This is the result of my encounter with the Enterprise, Commander. So you can see I don't particularly welcome your presence here.
I'm sorry you feel that way. We just came to get our people. We won't cause you any more trouble.
And a few people that apparently Lawler was experimenting on. He reveals that Lawler has been experimenting on the Borg, attempting to remake them in his image, which is really creepy too. And then we find out in conversations between Lawler and Data that Lawler is using emotions on Data, like a mind-controlling drug. It's like he's taking away
in a
emotions.
weird sort of thing where he can control him through this very bad special effect thumb.
Yes.
Rubbery-looking, like hand
like
thumb
weird,
thing where he
opens
puts
up
it
his
open.
thumb.
And
There's something.
Yeah.
There's something in there that he's like a button that he's hitting or
Yeah.
something that's making Data feel certain things. Meanwhile, Data is doing experiments on Geordi for some reason. I don't know what he's trying. Is he trying to do something? Is this like the terrible shit that they were doing to the Borg? Is what
I think
Data
they're trying
is
to
doing?
scan his mind or something, but that was a weird sort of continuity thing, and maybe you can like clarify something in my head. Okay, so at some point they figure out how to sort of what the frequency is of something, and that they can communicate with Data, sort of, and reboot his program.
Well, yeah,
and they have to take part
away,
of a Borg apart to do it, but like they take a piece. I guess they don't notice. And
take
then,
a piece, leave a piece.
but then there's this weird continuity thing where he discusses it with Geordi in the cell, and then Geordi's all of a sudden not there and then being interrogated. And they never really explain him leaving and being interrogated more. Maybe I'm mistaken.
Well, they strap him down to a chair and then they put some kind of a thing in. And Geordi keeps telling him, "You're going to regret doing this, Data. You know, we're friends and all this stuff." And Data's like kind of like lost in his own little world here because of Lawler. They took Geordi's visor because Geordi saw that some kind of beam was going into Data's head.
Mm-hmm.
He could see that, so they took his visor.
And they would I just realized they would kind of repurpose this whole interrogation using Geordi thing and visor in Generations, because what did the bad guy do? Malcolm McDowell, he took him prisoner, or the Klingons too. They took him prisoner, put some sort of thing in his visor, then they let him go, and then they were able to see what he was doing.
Yeah,
in
they put
engineering
like a little,
and be able to reprogram their frequency to
little camera.
Shut
they
it
put
down.
like a webcam on him
Yeah.
or something. And then there's a big shot of Beverly and Lursa and B'Etor, like, human females are so repulsive. Just kind of a funny joke. Yeah, they always go after Geordi. They always pick on Geordi.
Why they gotta
Geordi's
mess with the brother? Come on.
Geordi is always the one who, I mean, like Hugh's friend was Geordi, and Geordi's like a character who on the surface seems so pathetic because he can't make it work with a woman, right? So he befriends all the outcasts and misfits.
You
of
know,
the
you're
world.
right. I never saw Geordi with a woman, although maybe he was gay. We don't know. He
tried. He would try.
He was trying with women. I never noticed. I just never noticed him.
Remember how he created a girlfriend in the holodeck, and he had the nerve to yell at Barclay about doing that?
Oh, I don't even remember that. Jeez,
he created like
he's a charismatic, smart guy, and he knows what he's doing. He should have been able to get laid. It shouldn't have been a problem.
He's okay. I guess but he's always.
And
been
how can
picked
he
on.
get nervous?
Remember the episode where the Romulans capture him and they turn him into a Manchurian candidate? You know, Tasha Yar, daughter Tasha Yar, was part of this whole Romulan conspiracy to get him to murder a Klingon. They were using
I'm gonna have to
mind
go back.
control.
All these bad things happening to Geordi. Jeez.
Yes, it's from season 4 and it's called The Mind's Eye. Yeah, a lot of shit always happens to Geordi.
I would say he's probably he's probably the most likable and relatable characters on the show.
He's okay. Well, he's okay. I find him a little annoying because he starts lecturing people about their behavior, and I'm like, shut the fuck up,
smartest
Geordi.
person in the room. That's why.
I won't accept. I accept Riker lecturing me. I accept Picard. I even accept Worf lecturing me. But Geordi is very much kind of like, I don't know. He's kind of like a goody two shoes. You know, he's like nah, 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 nah. You know,
But
he's like
he's
Troy. Whenever Troy is always trying to lecture people about their attitudes, I'm like, shut up, Troy. It's usually whenever I'm watching Next Generation or something like that, I'm like, shut up, Troy, shut up, Geordi.
I thought it was always shut up, Wesley.
Shut up, Wesley. I don't mind Wesley. Actually, I liked Wesley. I mean, a lot of people hated Wesley, but I liked him a lot.
Booted his ass off, and then they had him come back, and he'd gone bad, and he tried to do some sort of thing, and you got the guy.
I don't like what they did. I don't like what they did with his character. They turned him into a star child at the end of his final episode.
Well, hell, I mean, if you look in the deleted scenes, he's back in. He's in Nemesis.
Yeah,
and you can actually see him in Nemesis if you look like way off on the side. If you have like a good TV that doesn't have overscan, you can actually see him on the side at that wedding.
But it's weird. They were playing around. At this point, they were playing around with a lot of shit.
Mm-hmm.
They were insinuating a romance between Worf and Troy.
That went nowhere.
And then, that went nowhere. And Troy and Riker wound up getting married.
They
hook up. They're sort of like, I don't know. Troy and Riker are kind of like fuck buddies. It's like, well, I'm alone. Are you alone? Yeah, I'm alone.
I mean,
okay, let's go fuck.
You got to remember, and this has age. You know, you get to a certain age, and you're like, well, we like each other. And we get along, and we don't, and we could probably do this forever, if you want. I mean, neither of them could really get anything together with anybody else, and they liked each other, so it's like, we might as well. I think that's kind of, and then you internalize that of like, oh, I must love them, and then you can create your own sort of love story in your head, I guess.
So, getting back to
this
episode, Picard comes up. He like pockets a piece of Borg technology, some little thing, and they alter it to create like interference, to run interference in Data's head, and so Data finally comes to his senses. Riker and Worf go into the cave. They find Hugh and all the people. Hugh says, "I'm not going to help you." He's like, "How's Geordi?" "But I'm not going to help you. How's Geordi?" And they're like, "Well, Geordi was captured. He's probably being tortured to death right now as we speak, but nothing on you, so we're just going to take off."
Mm-hmm.
So then Hugh, finally, I guess, Hugh and his guys come in. They storm the Borg palace there, whatever it is. Data gets back under his own control, and Lawler, basically takes off. He's like going to escape, get into an escape pod and just take off and leave in the middle of all this chaos. Data phasers him and then deactivates him. But he does take the emotion chip, which he will utilize in the first movie. And the first movie that comes out, Generations.
Yeah.
Which,
the chip looks a little different. It's like this one almost looks like a little Pac-Man. Like when they finally get it out, it almost looks like a little Pac-Man. Whereas the chip in Generations is different. It's like, it looks kind of more like a sort of a damaged part of a microchip or something.
Plus, he has it in this really snazzy display box that looks like something from Franklin Mint or something.
Yeah.
So all in all, the first episode is better. The second episode, not so much. Usually, there are no tells between the end of a season and the beginning of a season, but there's definitely a tell, and that's Troy's hair. Troy's hair has gotten lighter for some reason.
I didn't know. I have to go back. Maybe I have to go back. I didn't notice any.
It goes from a dark brown to a very like a lighter brown, a slightly lighter brown.
Do you think maybe she did some sort of acting gig in between, or?
I think she just wanted to change, and they were too lazy by this point to explain anything. Maybe it was bleached by the sun. Maybe they were like,
she's just hanging out on the beach and just chilling.
I mean, she's still very, very lovely. She's still very lovely. And for some reason, I don't understand it, but even when she's when she's forced to wear the Starfleet uniform, it's still 2 sizes too small.
Well, of course it's too. They want that. They need
so
the teenage boy audience.
It's still kind of a bunny suit, but it's like an official bunny suit.
Mm-hmm.
She was wearing that cute little slinky that cute little slinky jumpsuit, and then that asshole starship captain tells her, he says, I prefer a certain decorum on my bridge. Wear a uniform, please. So she does, but she's like, fuck you. I'm going to wear one 2 sizes too small to accentuate my breasts and my ass.
So this gets us to basically the end of the episode where they have like sort of a fight that's like the way it's shot and the way it's done. It's very A to B to C kind of fighting. When I saw it, it looked very stilted. It looked very sort of
it's
old
like
school
jab,
Star Trek.
uppercut,
Stilted.
right cross, punch in the stomach, kick, jab, right. It's like
Karate chop, and it's like the slowest.
Judo
they're all
chop.
moving slow. It kind of reminded me of something out of Land of the Lost when they're trying to fight the Slee Stack and they're just sort of like moving around a little bit, you know.
Data has always been a character that fascinated me. He never irritated me like the other three that I mentioned. It's Shut Up Beverly, Shut Up Troy, Shut Up Geordi. Data and Worf were the most interesting of the subordinate characters. Riker was always my favorite. I loved him because I liked his style. He was very much like a William Shatner type. I love that. I love that. And there's a great episode called First Contact, actually, from the 4th season, where Bebe Neuwirth, who was Lilith on Cheers and Phrases, she plays an alien, and she lets Riker go, but she lets him go on the condition that he make love to her. And I thought, this is such a great Star Trek moment.
Well,
she's like, I've always wanted to make love with an alien.
Where he had to kind of fuck his way out.
He's like, okay, fine.
Yeah,
just tell me where to put it.
Yeah, remember that episode? I think it was the first season when they landed on this planet of sort of Amazon women, and they had their bitch boys, and then he
wait, Amazon. Oh yeah. And I remember that. Yeah.
She just wanted a real man, you know.
Yeah,
he's a real man.
She's like the leader, and she puts him in this outfit, and she puts like an earring on him or something like that. Yeah. And they make it. They totally make it, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, it's like all in the line of duty, ma'am.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love Riker, and of course Picard. I love Picard. I thought he was always a great character. Patrick Stewart is like this incredible powerhouse actor who didn't really like his job when he first got it because he was very British, and everybody. This according to the documentary Shatner made. He was very serious about what he wanted to do, and he, as a Shakespearean actor, being from that kind of stock, he took his job very seriously, and all these people were just kind of clowning around and having fun and telling jokes. He was very stiff, and he was like, "Come on, we must be professional." He liked to use that word a lot, professional.
I think it's a combination of factors. One, if he's British, he's already miserable because that's just the way they are. Two, he comes in, he's very professional. He just can't seem to wrap his brain around, okay, I do this, I can have fun here, and then that allows me to do the other serious things that I enjoy doing. So it's like he can have fun, and then he can be serious and do it. It enables him to do other things.
Final thoughts on these 2 episodes, David?
It was nice to get back into Next Generation, although it was maybe not under the best circumstances. We were gonna, because it was about like sort of a tribute to Stephen Hawking, even though he's on it for like a minute. It was nice to get back to it. It looked great. The new HD remasters look and sound awesome. So
it looked great.
If anybody ever has like Netflix or Amazon, or even you can catch them on like BBC America, sometimes like they're about half and half with the remasters. Like some of them are the HD, some of them are just upscaled standard def. But if you can,
this I've noticed with Deep Space Nine, it's standard def on Netflix, but the picture quality improves as we get into the 4th and 5th seasons. I've noticed this. It's interesting.
Maybe just better film stock or something.
Maybe.
But so yeah, I my thoughts on this particular episode, not the best example of Next Generation, just because it starts off pretty cool, and then it just sort of like, it felt very meh the second half. But it's hard to pay off these sort of things sometimes. But I was
hoping for a more dramatic,
not this weird slow
ending.
Fist fight at the end where it's like, whatever. But I think that even compared to the old series, it's still solid. It's like it's so well made. It's like I feel like it's sort of the beginning of the well-made TV show that we got starting in the 90s and now.
Well, yeah, but also remember, Star Trek was a very well-made show for the 60s, for the late 60s, because you saw what shows looked like back then. They looked like really bad, really cheap.
Yeah, and especially the early episodes where they actually cared of Star Trek.
Plus, on the big screen in the high def, I can still see flaws in some of the set design and visual effects.
Yeah, this looked good. This whole thing looked so well put together and looked good. What are your opinions on this episode, though? Because you never really...
I liked the first episode. The second one was a little sloppy. I thought the subplot involving the 2 junior officers dealing with each other and Beverly being in command is just kind of unrealistic. I would not have put her in command. I would not have done a lot of the conceits that they do on the show where they have to get Picard involved personally and all the senior staff involved. You've got 1,000 people on that ship. You can send as much cannon fodder down as possible for them to figure it out. But I understand the conceit of having a show where you have to have the lead characters doing this.
Yeah.
yeah, the resolution was a little touchy-feely for my taste, and it should have been much more violent. It should have been much more violent, and there should have been more of a resolution involving Hugh and the Borg. Possibly with Hugh maybe being installed as the leader of the Borg.
Yeah, they just kind of left it there, and that was like the next thing we would deal with the Borg would be First Contact, I believe. Like this was the last of the Borg in the series, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're right because
so it's like they wrapped up Lore and they wrapped up the Borg in a sort of a meh.
Yeah, they did. And the 7th season is kind of there's only like maybe a couple of episodes that are good in the second. A lot of it is really
well. Having said that last episode is excellent.
All Good Things is okay. Yeah, it is a good one. But there was an episode where Beverly has sex with a ghost. There's an episode where Data goes nuts. Another episode where Data goes nuts. There's a lot of Data going nuts in the Data is very much the star of the 7th season. He gets the most. He gets the most stories, the most episodes about him.
Well, remember this was the season where they were starting Deep Space Nine. Like this was the beginning.
Well, actually,
Deep Space
they
Nine
started
would be like 3 months after this because it started, I believe, in January.
No. Actually, Deep Space Nine started right after the 2-parter where Picard was tortured by the Cardassians.
Oh.
That was in the middle of season 6. So Deep Space Nine
was in early 93. Early 93.
Yeah. Yeah, Deep Space Nine's first season was kind of like an abbreviated season from January to May of 93. And then it came back in the
well, let's not forget that was sort of the launching of some sort of Paramount. It wasn't even UPN then, but it was launching
it wasn't UPN yet.
It was a syndication package where you had that and you'd have you had Deep Space Nine, and then there was actually a series based on the Untouchables. I remember that. Like it would be Deep Space Nine and Untouchables.
Yes.
Part of a package.
I remember that. Yeah. So this was when Rick Berman had like total control of the Star Trek franchise until he was unceremoniously let go after, what was it, Nemesis. I forget what happened.
That's a good run. I mean, if he's on the show, he's doing Next Generation, and then he finally ends on, I mean, let's face it, it was a flop. You can debate if it was a good movie or not. It didn't make a lot of money, so...
No,
I mean you got to fire.
It was it was a little disappointing for me to watch. It got kind of. I mean, like First Contact is generally considered the best Next Generation movie, and directed by Jonathan Frakes. Insurrection was not really that good. Insurrection was more of an episode. It would have made a really good episode of Next Generation, but not a movie. But
I would say Nemesis is better than Insurrection, and I'd say
I can't blame Frakes for that because he says in the commentary that he was basically kind of forced to direct this script because it was written by all the major writers of the show. So he really didn't have any power over the only decisions that he was allowed to make. He said were like casting choices, like he recommended.
But that made you kind of like look at the grosses of like. The movies were never massive hits. They were always very profitable, good-sized hits. But I mean, even when you look at like the old movies compared to like they always do decent but not massive. Even the new ones.
Yeah.
Like if you compare the grosses of like up until the reboot of Star Trek in 2009, the highest grossing of the Star Trek movies adjusted for inflation was the first Star Trek movie. Then it's I believe Star Trek 4, then it's Star Trek 2, then it's Star Trek 3, then it's Star Trek and they're all kind of like if you look at the adjusted grosses, they're all within like 20 million of each other. So they all kind of, and then Star Trek 5 was considered a flop, but actually it made about half of what the other ones made, but that's still a decent amount of money and the budget looked low. And then the grosses went up for Star Trek 6, but again, I think they kept that budget low, so it probably made a really good profit. And then you get to Generations makes about what 6 made, maybe just a little more. And then
I have a list of the box office performance.
First Contact is like a bump, and then it starts to go down when you get to
Generations made good money, of course. First Contact did better than that. Insurrection did a little bit worse than First Contact, but Nemesis was a true flop.
Well, yeah.
But we're talking, what are we talking? 1987 through 2005, I believe, is when Enterprise ended.
Yeah.
So that's like 18 years. I mean, that's 18 years of this new Star Trek franchise, which was much more popular. as viewing figures go.
It was always solid, but never really fully. It never hit those sort of like the Marvel level of like.
It never hit the Marvel level. It never hit the Star Wars level.
No, it never hit this like huge level of like everybody enjoying. It was always sort of a niche.
But these are much lower budgets, though. I mean, these movies were made on
until they got to Nemesis. Nemesis looks like it's got like a lot of money put into it. It was like a last.
Well, according to my figures, Insurrection's budget was $10 million more than Nemesis. It's weird. I think it has to do with all the salaries of the actors that were involved.
I am tired.
Okay, well, we should wrap this one up.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Again, this episode is dedicated to Stephen Hawking. Our next episode will be about a thing about machines, I call it. And it was meant to follow our review of the motion picture, but we had to do this special, sad emergency episode. So thanks for tuning in, and good night.
Good night.
You have been listening to Ship to Ship, a Star Trek podcast, with your hosts, David Lawler and David B. Anderson. To find out more about us, subscribe to our YouTube channel or visit us at www.blissville.net or on Facebook at Misadventures in Blissville. Good night.